The point is, we do very much try to be warm and welcoming without being overwhelming. So it's one of those balances we try to keep. But if you would like to have us call you, do know we are glad that you are here. There are sermon notes inside of your bulletin as well. I would encourage you to take those out and to write down, underline the things you want to remember. My goal for every message is to give you some things, some thoughts for your Christian toolbox, that as you go into the upcoming week, you'll have a few helps and scriptures to ponder. My goal also is that you will read the devotionals at the top. If you already have a devotional book, great. Then I would encourage you to be sure that you keep that up as well. A couple things. I'm going to start off with where I want to end, but here it is. Today's big message is 3D living or 3D priorities. I've worked really hard on this. This is profound truth, right? Y'all have never heard this before. Here we go. Devos. I can't even remember. Dinner. And day of rest. Sounds so simple. Matter of fact, we'll lead it up. It sounds so simple. I know. Devos, dinner, day of rest. As I pondered, how do we start the new year off right? How do we try and remember, right, the things that matter, and how do we invest? Here we go. How do we invest our lives in the things that have things of eternal significance? To start, I'll boil it down to three things. And these three things, in my opinion, if you get them pushed aside, if they get lost in the chaos of your life, if you ever get to the point where you're like, you know what, other things matter more than this, I think you're in trouble. So, Devos, obviously, a little bit of time every day, building your relationship, nurturing your relationship with Jesus, one-on-one. Dinner. Every day you find a way. And some of you are like, it's impossible, we can't do it. Okay, I get that. God gets that. But I firmly believe that one of the problems in our society and with our families today is we don't value dinner together anymore. And so what I would encourage you to just think about, I don't care if you agree with me, I care that you learn what I'm saying and go ponder it. We need to get back to this idea of sitting down for dinner with our loved ones as regularly as possible. If you can't do it daily, fine, you can't. But I would suggest to you one of the reasons we can't is because nobody else takes it seriously, and we think it is more important to be at work late, to put our kids in all these activities, to do this other stuff, and I would suggest to you that's one reason why our marriages and our families are falling apart. We're not spending quality time together. So, dinner. Day of rest. Every Sunday should be a Christmas holiday. Unless you hated Christmas, then it needs to be a better one than that, right? I mean, every Sunday, God is very clear on this. Human beings cannot work 7 days a week and be healthy over time. And that doesn't just mean you at your job, that means your children can't either. That's why the scriptures say very clearly, you and your children and your animals. Even it's like, don't let your animals work. It's like, what does that mean for my dog? I'm not really sure, Susan, but the point is, we all need a day of rest. And what do we do on this day of rest? It is a sacred day where we are supposed to be loving God, and loving one another. Yet again, a priority of Scripture is for us to nurture our relationships, which is where I really want to start. We all, me included, have a problem in our society nurturing our relationships. We are taught, we are shown, everybody tells us that your work, your job, your money, your house, everything else, your activity, everything else is more important than your relationships. When's the last time you were at work and your boss said, you know what, take a day and go spend some time with your spouse. And I'm not going to dock you. Take a day, a family day. Just go spend some time with family. How come? Am I in trouble? No, because I just want you to go. No, I mean, our work environments don't do this. What we say is you can only take 2 days off. 2 weeks off a year for some of you. The rest of the time, you better be here and you better be working. How many of our schools, how many of our athletics, and we wrestle with this too, say, okay, here's the deal. We're going to protect 5 to 6:30. You go eat with your family, spend time with your family, and then come to practice or come to games. I mean, it just doesn't happen anymore. So what happens, we know this, our marriages begin to crumble, our relationships to our children begin to, we don't even know how to talk to our children in so many instances. So rather than talk to them, let's just keep them busy. No, we need to work at this. We need to work with our spouse. We need to realize relationships are the only thing in all of life that matter. I'm going to come back to that from several different angles. But I will say it again. If what you're doing isn't tied to a relationship, either to God or to others, or in a healthy way to yourself, what you're doing isn't ultimately going to matter. It just isn't. So where do we start with this? Well, I've got 2 scriptures. The first is just a reminder, the foundational scripture of this series is from Matthew chapter 7. Many of you have heard this one before. And then we're going to jump back to Ecclesiastes and hear from a very depressed scholar. But anyway, Matthew chapter 7, and Jesus is not depressed when he's saying this. He's like, here's the deal, folks. There are 2 foundations in life. Just 2. Matthew 7, and I'm going to start reading in verse 24. 2 foundations in life. You are either, and you are building on one of them. It's not like you can take some time and decide which one you are building on, one or the other. And what Jesus is saying, there is this thing in life that we call storms, tempests, hurricanes, problems, fire, wind, stuff that continually buffets against your house. These are the problems we all deal with from day to day. And by the way, even if you fixed a lot of problems this past year, you're like, I've made it, my life is perfect. I got bad news for you. You're going to have more problems this upcoming year. That's just the way it works. Man, I'm just a downer preacher, right? Everyone leave depressed today. This is life. You fix one, you get another. Every time with our house, we just fixed our air conditioner. Then the other air conditioner goes out. We fixed that. Our fireplace goes out. We fixed that. I'm telling you, 3 weeks later, our oven went out. We fixed our oven. This is no joke. Our washing machine went out. I have never seen in my house, and Gladys is like, well, I guess in 10 years we'll have to replace it all again. I mean, anyway, I'm not even going to talk about my body. I've seen the doctor like 80 times in the last 2 days. And they're like, well, your eye's going bad, your back's out, so anyway, your hair's, anyway. Online, did I just blind you? They're like, oh, I can't see anything. Anyway, we're welcome. You're online. Sorry, you're blind. Everybody who hears these words of mine, everybody, there's no exceptions. There are no exceptions. And puts them into practice. You do what you know that Jesus teaches. This is where we were with consecration. You do what you know, and then you keep learning, and as you learn new stuff, you do that too. It's never that we don't do stuff we know. You do what you know, and you keep reading and studying, and you learn new stuff. That's how Christianity builds. You put them into practice. You're like a wise builder who built your house on bedrock. Now, what's your house? What's inside of you? It is this idea of whatever it is that gives you peace and hope and joy and contentment, whatever that is, it's not outside of you. So as you're building whatever it is inside of you, you are going to build, right, a foundation of something. If you put the words of Jesus into practice on a daily basis, you are building on rock. Who cares? I'm glad you asked. The rain falls, the floods come, the wind blows and beat against the house, and it doesn't fall. Right? Such deep truth from Jesus. What does rain represent? What do floods represent? What do the winds represent in your life? What is that represented in the past 12 months? For many of you, I guarantee you, for all of you, we could sit down and have coffee. You could tell me stories of where over the past 12 months you have dealt with wind and rain and winds and storms. You've had struggles that the world has literally thrown against you. What is that? That's what he's talking about. This is the struggle we have with our spouses, with our children, with our money, with our jobs, with whatever. If you build what's in here on the practice of following Jesus when the world doesn't, you're going to find your house does what? Yeah, it makes it. It doesn't mean that you don't lose some shingles and have to call the insurance company to fix the roof. It means that your house will still be standing. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be exposed to suffering and pain and tears, but it means in the midst of that, you will survive and you can repair the damage and move on. He never says you're not going to experience storms, does he? He says when they come. And by the way, for all of us in the next 12 months, they're coming. The storms are coming. The chaos is coming. You may be in the midst of it. Be prepared. That's why we're here in church. That's why we have the devotionals. That's why we eat dinner together on the times when it's good, not just when times are bad. You eat dinner together whenever you have the opportunity. And why we have days of rest to remember the things that matter, because we're building something important. But everyone, everybody, every human being, every person who hears these words of mine and they don't do them is like a fool who built a house on sand. Whew, that's tough. Why? Why is it foolish to not put into practice what Jesus says? Because when the rains fall, when the floods come, when the winds blow and beat against your house, it will fall. And he says, and be completely destroyed. These foundational truths, they aren't just weak words to follow when you need a Band-Aid on a wound and you're like, God, you know what? My life is bad, so let's put the God Band-Aid on, and then when life's better, a little bit, we'll just rip it off and forget about this stuff. No, these are words to literally live by that completely change the way you live life. And if you do this, Jesus says, you will find not that all the problems go away. Are we hearing this? He's saying when the problems come, you will find that you aren't destroyed by them. Now, I'll tell you, I've worked with some folks, and I didn't even know a couple, not in this church, who I just hate to hear it, people I care about who, I thought they were doing all right, and all of a sudden I find out that literally in the past month they've dealt with some deep depression and some suicidal issues, and it's like, where did that come from? Where did that depression come? How has this, well, some of it's explainable. How do we get into such a place? And I would suggest to you, one, let me be very clear. Sometimes it is medical and chemical, and that absolutely needs to be addressed. God heals through doctors and medicine. Hear me well. But the other part of it also comes because we live poorly and we think poorly. We don't do what God says, and our lives fall apart. And then we're like, why me? And God's saying to us, don't blame me for all of this, because you knew better and you chose something else. So Ecclesiastes, Old Testament, big picture Old Testament. There's a lot going on in the Old Testament, which is why it's important we study and kind of learn how to read and understand the Old Testament. You have some big sections in the Old Testament. You have the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. It gives the initial story of Abraham and how God's beginning to move into the world and share with the literal whole world that God has a bigger plan and a deeper purpose other than people just going crazy and fighting all the time. Exodus, Moses, Promised Land, y'all have heard of that stuff, hopefully. You get to the historical books, the next section of your Old Testament, and basically the historical books operate by this theology called the Deuteronomic, this is big stuff, I know, big words, history of theology, but Deuteronomy, basically, it's the book of law. It says if you do these things, God's going to bless you. And if you don't do these things, God's going to curse you. And through those historical books, what you find is that as people follow the laws of God, things tend to go well. As they don't follow the laws of God, well, things tend to go poorly. We've got to be careful in the church that's not what we're preaching, because the next section of your Old Testament is called the wisdom literature. Whole section where you have people like Job who do everything God says. They're faithful, and the storms still come and almost wipe out his whole life. Interesting. But I thought if we followed God, we'd never suffer. Where does anybody get that? Last time I checked, how did it end for Jesus? Every disciple, every follower of original disciple of Christ was crucified, or they just got tortured by being boiled in a big vat of oil. Didn't end well. Paul talks about sufferings along his journey, from shipwrecks to, just lots of. So here's Job. He's lived a pretty good life, and all of a sudden the storms come, don't they? His friends even tell him, just curse God and die. Job's like, no, I'm not going to. He was steady the whole way. Granted. But at the very end, when it all came out of the wash, he's all right. Ecclesiastes, Solomon is given the same type of testimony. In Ecclesiastes, and that's why I got to be careful to read this through the proper lens, because if you read Ecclesiastes thinking, well, this is easily God's truth for all time, and we're just going to read it as a surface reading and think this is how all of life is, well, then you might as well just go ahead and throw it all away. You know why? Listen to what he says. Ecclesiastes 1:1, everything is pointless, perfectly pointless. All of life is futile. This is terrible. Why isn't anything better? Now, if that's the only Bible verse you knew, and we're going to pull that out of context, think about it. You know what? Let's just drop the mic and say, you know what? I quit. So what's going on here? Why does the Bible say everything is futile, everything is pointless? Because that's how Solomon was feeling. Solomon is writing this, he's getting towards the end of his life, and he'd worked really hard. He'd done a lot of amazing things, and he's looking back on it like maybe we look on the past year. He's like, another year has come, another year is gone. Is this it? Boy, that's one of the reasons we don't like to slow down and reflect over the past year, because we're like, man, is this it? In fact, maybe we ought to ask the question real quick. If the rest of your life is like the last 12 months, if that's all there is, what do you think? Are you encouraged? Are you like, woohoo? Or are you like, that's depressing? Well, it all depends on a lot of stuff. He goes into this idea of another year has come, another year is gone. I can't believe it's 2020. It's just, I remember the year 2000, and some of you are like, when was that, But it's like yesterday. I remember 9/11. It's like yesterday. when those planes and all that stuff, some of you remember that. Some of you have, it just goes so fast. My parents keep telling me it just goes faster. So Solomon is saying that's how he feels. What do people gain, verse 3, from all the hard work that they work so hard for under the sun? Good question. My hunch is many of you have worked really hard at whatever you've been working hard at for the past 12 months, haven't you? Most of you have been working really hard. So he's wanting you to ask, what do you have to gain for all your hard work over the last 12 months? Is your bank account a little bit better? Is that it? Are you closer to your spouse? Are you closer to your kids? Are you closer to God? What have you been working so hard for? And for him, he's frustrated because he's worked really hard and he's not feeling the benefits of all his hard work. And he's like, a generation goes, a generation comes. The earth is just like it's always been. The sun rises, the sun sets, it returns, panning to the place where it dawns. The wind blows to the south, goes around to the north, around and around blows the wind. The wind returns and does its rounds again. The streams flow to the sea is never full. To the place where the rivers flow, that they may continue to flow. All words are tiring. No one's able to really speak. The eye isn't satisfied with what we see. Neither is the ear really filled up or satisfied by what you hear. We always want more, and things just keep going around. It's the Lion King circle of life. Circle of life. We just saw it. Good movie. Anyway. Whatever has happened, it's going to happen again. There's nothing new under the sun. We think we're all, inventive and smart. Well, the Egyptians thought they were smart. The Romans thought they were smart. We think we're smart. Somebody's going to come after us in 100, 200, 300 years. Where everybody just so smart. How smart are the Romans now? How smart are the Egyptians now? They're dead. That's what he's saying. Look at this. People say, look at this. I've invented something new. It's new. It was really around for ages before us. There's no remembrance of the things in the past, nor of things to come in the future, nor will there be any remembrance of those who come along in the future. We're going to show a video in a minute, but I want to ask this question. Don't answer out loud, that would be weird. But could you tell me the names of all of your great-grandparents? I am curious. Raise your hand. Do you know the names? Who in here knows the names of every great-grandparent? Not one, all of them. Not bad. But you don't know them all. So you left that one behind. Yeah, that poor great-grandparent. Anyway, think about that. We're only talking about 3 generations away, and we don't even remember who they were. I mean, think how fast that's. Don't we think we're going to make more of an impact than that? Don't you think they thought so? What about your great-great-grandparents? What about 3 before? I mean, here's the point is that even just a few generations before us, we don't have any clue. And we don't care. Because if you did care, you would know. How about this? With all the money and all the work and all the effort that your great-grandparents put into their lives, that you don't even know their names, how much has their work and their money and their effort actually helped you have a better life? For most of us who don't have generational wealth, I mean, me and Gladys started with basically nothing. Interesting thought. We think we're making this big difference. We think we're doing all this stuff, and your kids' grandkids won't even know your name. So Solomon's depressed about this. He's like, well, that's awful. And so he goes into this discussion about what he's invested his life in. In verse 13, in expanding his mind, and call that intellectualism, he said, I worked so hard to be smart and get all my degrees and have all this wisdom. And in verse 16, he says, I realize that everything I've learned is pointless, chasing the wind. Whew, are you sad yet? Let's get worse. He says in chapter 2, verse 1, he says, okay, I'm going to devote my whole life to having fun. Pleasure. By the way, the word for that's hedonism. Ugh. And he said, I did. I had a lot of fun. And he said, but having fun after a while is madness, not pleasure. That's the problem with like drug addiction and alcohol addiction. All that. It feels good in the moment, but you always wake up the next day and you feel worse than you did before. That's the problem with pursuing pleasure. By the way, if we're having an epidemic of pornography. Stop it. Stop it. Y'all delete those pictures, you delete those websites. If you can't handle it, you throw away your computer because it is madness. People go mad because it is never satisfying. Pleasure. Drugs, alcohol, pornography. Great in the moment, but you will pay dearly, as will your family if you have one after it all. Materialism. So he's like, okay, that doesn't do it, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to build stuff, and I'm going to acquire stuff. And he did. Again, he's looking back. He was one of the wealthiest people on the planet by the time all was said and done with Solomon. He had built everything he could build. There was nothing else to do if you were a human being back then. He did it all. And he's looking back at everything he built. And here's what he said. I acquired, I built, I made, I planted, from verse 4 all the way down to verse, 11. He goes about all this stuff that is hard work. He's accomplishing all this stuff. He's like, now I'm looking back and I realize, verse 11, it's chasing the wind. It's all been chasing the wind. I built all this stuff. I put all this effort in, and here's what it's doing for me today. Nothing. Well, that's depressing. Well, he was depressed. Look, there's a reason. It's not the only reason, but there is a reason. One of the reasons people get depressed. And this is it. And we need to be very careful we don't fall into this trap. We invest our lives, we invest our time in activities, we invest our lives, we invest our time in stuff, in worldly pursuits, and you get it, you accomplish it, you do it, and you get on the other side of it, and you know what you realize? It hasn't helped a thing. Let's show this video real quick, and then I'll get a little more positive on you before just beating you right with a stick on the head. Let's watch this, and then we'll move forward.
And so I think some of our hope is constantly what we will have in the future. We're constantly trying to see around the corner, and I'm telling you, you have set yourself up for some despair, maybe even depression, some hurts. Why? Why would I say that? Let me show you from the Word, verse 14.
Why? James.
You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. You don't know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Why? You do not know you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Can I show you what James just said your life was? Look, I'm going to show you a picture of your life. Infancy to the grave. Ready? Did you see it? Let me show you your life again, okay? Ready? Here today.
That's it. That's what I wanted y'all to see.
Your life.
That's good, Melissa. Thanks.
Okay?
Yeah, so I just wanted you to see, I didn't figure I could do that as well as he could. So the question is, if that's all we are, which is true, how do we make that mean something? right? And not only that, not only how do you make it mean something giving out, but how do you feel like someone else feels like you've meant something to them too? Well, it starts with this big idea. We all must come to the point where we finally understand one of Solomon's points. Worldly pursuits are not the answer. Intellectualism, materialism, hedonism, whatever the ism you want to call it, this world and the things of this world, they not only don't care for you, but they don't care at all. Say it again. This world and the things of this world, the things that we think our job is to build them up and control them, there is no mother in nature. Okay? There is no mother in the world that's out there saying, you care for me and I'll care for you. No. I was looking up this. Y'all know how many seasons of Survivor they've now had? 39. I was like, what? 2 seasons a year for 18 years and counting. I think I stopped on season 2. I had no idea they're still going. Some of you are watching it. You're like, oh, it's good too. But why do we like Survivor? Here's part of the reason why is because it's always amazing to us when we're behind closed doors with the air conditioning running, how hard it is. What's the other awful? Naked and Afraid. It's like, ugh. One, I'm afraid to see you naked. But the other thing is just like, bleh. But anyway, you get people out in the elements and they're exposed and you realize that's tough. That's harsh. Can they survive in this? And some of them can't, literally. When's the last time Survivor contestants go out and Mother Nature said, you know what? You're hungry? Here, have some food. Oh, are you cold? Here, let me just give you the perfect amount of sunshine for you to be comfy. No, it's more like this show. I told a few of you this story, but me, Gladys, and Scott are watching around. We just did the Disney Plus channel, and we're so proud of ourselves. And they have National Geographic, and we love Bear Grylls. We watch all of Bear Grylls. So Bear Grylls has this new National Geographic special, A Hostile Planet. And we're thinking, oh, cool, Bear Grylls is going to do his old stuff and dive under the ice and, show us. No, they start off and they've got this picture. And when y'all go home and watch it, you'll be like, oh, he's so right on this. But it's like the little beautiful baby birds and two mommy bird, daddy bird, and they're on this beautiful scenic cliff. And Bear Grylls like, oh, y'all seen it? That's what. But so they're like, oh, the little birds in the hot tub, and the mommy, and they've got to get down to go get food. And so you're like, oh, and it's like a 300-foot cliff. I just spit a bubble. Sorry about that. For you up front, get an umbrella. Anyway, so these birds, and it's like, so the daddy bird, he flies off, and Bear Grylls is like, yeah, and then the mommy birds, they got to fly to food, and there's these 3 little birds up there, like hundreds of feet up in the air, and we're all just eating our popcorn and drinking. It's like, oh, and then this little bird goes to the edge, and he jumps off. He falls down, goes, poof, poof, and then a hawk comes, grabs it, and flies off, and we're like, oh. Like, surely that's not what this is about. And then the next bird's like, oh, no. And he's like, I'm going to try something different. So he goes on the side, he's like, poof, poof, poof. And then he's dead on the rocks. And Scott's like, Gladys like, turn that off. This is our family time. Y'all will all go watch it. You'll see what I'm talking about. You're like, it's horrible. Yeah, I missed the hostile part, but that's Mother Nature. When are we going to figure out when we invest in that? We're the ones crashing on the rocks. Why? Because money doesn't care about you. Your house doesn't care about you. Mother Nature doesn't care about you. How come? Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. God created nature, and God's like, that's awesome. But God created the form of a human being, but it was still a lump of clay. When everything changed was when God breathed life into the human. Follow me here. What gave life to that human? The breath of God. It's a big idea. The only things that will care for you and that are worth you caring for are those things that have breath of God in them. Period. This doesn't mean we don't enjoy the creation. God created creation very much for us to enjoy. It is good, it is very good. But not ever if we start to think the creation can fill what the Creator intended to fill. If you get those messed up, you are doomed to depression. Period. If your children get this messed up, and this is kind of, there are some kids that have kind of grown up, they've gone off to school, and and all of a sudden they're suicidal and depressed, which honestly I was that way when I went for college my first year, and I hate that so much, but it's one of the things we as parents need to be very careful about, that we don't teach our children that what matters is, right, your degree, where you go to school, how great you are at these athletic stuff, how good you are in music. Those are all good things if they're in their proper place. They lead to depression and despondency and so many problems if we tell our kids that's what your life is about. And many of us were raised that way, which is one reason why we don't have the answers for our children, because we're depressed too. We can't lead them where we haven't been. That's why if you ever want to be a good parent, the start is be a good person. If you want to be a good parent, the start is get your own heart and life right with God so you can exemplify, be the model to them what a good, full, abundant life looks like. No wonder so many of our kids are a mess. It's because we're a mess. So how do we fix it? How do we fix it? It starts with perspective and priorities. I wrote this out. Personal creatures can only be satisfied by the personal in life. Personal creatures can only be satisfied by the personal in life. The personal meaning what? God is personal, other people are personal, and you are. Wait, that sounds like, oh yeah, the great commandment. The most important thing in all of life, the most important Bible truth you ever learn is this, Jesus says. Love God with heart, soul, mind, and strength, which is everything, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Jesus, like you can sum up all of the law and the prophets, all the Old Testament, everything comes down to this one verse. Love God with all you have, and love other people, and love yourself. This is the personal in an impersonal world. You are made in God's image. When God breathed life into you, God's Spirit, in a sense, came within us, which made us personal too. Made your kids personal, made your spouse personal, made your friends personal. And as we connect and relate and nurture those relationships, notice your life gets fuller and better. The worse your relationships become fragmented, conflicted, all this stuff, the worse your life becomes. Period. So what must we do? What's the first step? Go back to basics. Fill in the blanks. Devos, dinner, and day of rest. in the chaos of this world, let's just take a step back as we go into this new year and think, what are the things we can do that will matter? Spend some quality time with God, developing, nurturing that relationship. Spend quality time monthly, once a year at Christmas. No, every day that you can with the people God has blessed you with to do what? Nurture your relationship with them. And you're like, well, I don't like being around my spouse that much. Exactly. Almost without exception, you sit down and talk to people who are having marriage problems, and you're like, well, when's the last time y'all actually had any kind of conversation? Oh, it's been a while. Y'all heard Brian Kirby give his testimony, and me and Gladys and Scott have been doing this too, where they sit down at the dinner table, and they're like, and many of you are like, well, I don't know what to say to my kids. Okay, Google search it. What do I say to my kids at the dinner table? Sometimes we have to learn how to communicate because we're so terrible at it. And your kids can't communicate either because we haven't taught them. So he had a great thing that we've adopted and love it. I look at Scott and I'm like, what are 3 good things that happened to you today and 1 bad thing? That's just changed the way we have conversation. It leads to all kinds of other stuff. Now I look at Gladys. What are 3 good things happened to you today and I don't want to hear about the bad? Right? But here's where I'm going to stop. It takes work. It does. It takes effort. And everything else, any of you who've ever tried to have a devotional, you know exactly what I'm saying. Everything else in the world is going to try and get in the way. Especially the storms and the rain and the wind, the chaos. How can we find calm in the chaos? I'm going to suggest to you that the name of this series is Inverted, living right side up in an upside down world. Our world is upside down when it says it is more important for you to work than to spend time with your family. I'm sorry, that's just wrong. Our world is upside down when it's saying it is more important for your kids to be in athletics and sports and school and all this other stuff 9 days out of the week than to spend time with us, your parents, around the dinner table. Our world is living upside down when they say, you really need to be working on Sunday because our company needs more money. This is the point of the company is profitability, right? Not all companies, some actually get it right, which is why all of us hate Chick-fil-A, because we can't go there for lunch today, right? Devo's dinner, day of rest. Say it with me. Devo's dinner, day of rest. One more time. There's a lot more, but I suggest to you those are very biblical. I suggest to you it is worth your time over the dinner table to talk about as you go into the new year with all of the chaos, how are we going to make this happen in our home? Do it, and it certainly is a good first step to moving into the abundance, the peace, the love, the joy, the hope that God wants for you this new year. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for today. Thank you for getting us through the past year. With whatever's going to happen this upcoming year, for me too, for all of us, pray that we would have your perspective, your priorities. We'd be able to navigate all this stuff with your lenses so that as we move into the end of next year, we can look back and see that we've made some progress, that we've built those treasures in heaven, that we're closer to you, that we're closer to the people we love, that our families, our kids, that we're all closer in loving each other and loving you as you would have us to. I pray for everyone here, for those worshiping online with us, for those who couldn't be with us, that we would know your peace which surpasses all comprehension. May you know the height and the depth and the width and the breadth of God's love for you. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.